So if you don't count comics, I've been in a bit of a reading slump. I haven't finished a book in a very long time, not since last September, in fact. I have a spreadsheet for that kind of thing. But that doesn't mean that I haven't been reading at all. It just means that I've been starting a lot of books that I have not finished. And I could go through all of them, but that would be an entire video in its own right. There will be one which I specifically want to reference today, and it will be kind of like a microcosm of all these other books which I've attempted to start, and kind of, I think some of the reasons why I've DNF'd some of them. And it's not really like a hard DNF, it's more of like a pause, or like an I'll get back to them or try them another time. But the one which I did make it all the way through for the first time in many months is The Last Wish, by, I forgot to look up how you pronounce his name, Andrzej Sapkowski. And I think it's important to add, translated into English by Danusia Stock. Now here's the thing, when someone's decided to read through the Witcher series, it's probably because they're a big fan of the games, and they've finished them and spent hundreds of hours in them. Not me! I have tried The Witcher 1 and The Witcher 2 and The Witcher 3, and I've never been able to play through fully any one of those games. Yeah, for those of you who didn't know, this attention span thing, it's not just books. I have trouble finishing. It's all sorts of media. But I have always really liked what I have played of The Witcher, and I've always wanted to see more of that world and that character. And I don't know, just on a whim someday, and that's the best origin story for loving a book, isn't it? Just on a whim you go, yeah, I want to check that out, sure. And here's the thing, going into this, I didn't know that this was a collection of short stories. It was only when I was 3 or 4 quote-unquote chapters into the book that I really started to realise, oh, this isn't one long continuous narrative, except it kind of is, and that's why I love it, right? So I've talked in the past about how I've tried reading short story collections, and I always forget to continue them because there's nothing drawing me back. There's no through line, right? Every new, like, for instance, Isaac Asimov's, I think it's called The Complete Robot, right? Is his short story collection. I've really enjoyed some of the short stories I've read in that collection, but I keep forgetting to go back and continue the damn book because there's nothing drawing me back to it besides just, oh, I should continue reading through that. But The Last Wish isn't like that because it is not a bundle of disconnected short stories. It is a collection of short stories which are all focused on one character going through the same world, and over time the events of the stories end up kind of creating this library of lore in the character's history which get referenced in future short stories within this same book, like The Butcher of Blaviken and how he got that title. And I really like that. So I've actually read a book like this before, a collection of short stories set within a fantasy world following a character or characters. I read last year the first Gotrek and Felix Warhammer novel, and I really enjoyed it, and it pretty much follows the same structure. The difference is, in this book, you've also got this kind of narrative framework interspersed between the chapters called The Voice of Reason, where, and it took me a while to realize this as well, it took me a couple of Voice of Reason chapters to realize that that is one big, long, continuous, multi-chapter story, and within it, we're kind of looking back on the events of those short stories which took place before the events of The Voice of Reason, and we're kind of like, we meet Dandelion in The Voice of Reason, and then Dandelion's like, hey, remember that time when... And then we go read the short story. And it's cool. I really like that. It's the perfect balance of enough variety to keep my brain interested and enough through line to keep me wondering where this journey is going to take our characters next. So here's the DNF that I'm going to compare this to. I got the entire quadrilogy of The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne. I'm sorry, I know people who love those books are groaning right now. I know, I will give them another chance, I promise you. But I started reading Malice. And here's the thing about Malice. It's a slow burn, I guess. It's a lot of setup. It is a lot of like, and it was good. What I read of it was good, don't get me wrong, but it's like, here's this character. They're like 14 years old. They're a child. They're going to become like this protagonist throughout the series. It's going to be like a coming of age thing. And we're going to learn all about who they are, where they live, the characters in their lives, the conflict within their life. And then we're going to go to another chapter. It's going to be another character also like, I think it's like a 16 or 17-year-old, and where they're at in their life and where they are in the world and how it's a little bit different over here, and the start of their journey and all of their feelings. And then we're going to go to another character and we're going to set them up, and that's great, right? Don't get me wrong, I read through the entirety of the Wheel of Time. I do like epic fantasy. And I'm sure at some point I will be in the mood for something like that again. But at the minute, my brain seems to be rejecting like these broad, slow, long, deep stories. And instead with The Witcher and The Last Wish, what we get is, this is the character, this is what he's doing. This is, like, we don't get a backstory for Geralt. We get like incidental dialogue which hints at, oh, no one fucking likes anyone from Rivia. Still don't know what that's about, by the way. You learn what a Witcher is by seeing him work. You learn who Geralt is by watching what he does. And I'm not saying that The Faithful and the Fallen is all like tell and not show, but it's so much more immediate, and that's just what I need right now. I'm not watching the beginning of some hero's journey, I'm watching the continued adventures of a morally ambiguous protagonist through this dark fantasy world. And I say morally ambiguous, he is mostly good, but he does kill cruelly, and sometimes needlessly, like in the very first short story. And I'm not getting into spoilers here, this is within the first few paragraphs, but he cuts down people who harass him in a bar, and it's technically self-defense, but it's also a little much. So yeah, just to touch on these short stories themselves without giving too much away. We've got The Witcher, we've got A Grain of Truth, The Lesser Evil, A Question of Price, The Edge of the World, and The Last Wish, with the Voice of Reason chapters being interspersed between. And for the most part, these are sequential. It's not quite that cut and dry, but there's definitely like one comes after the other after a certain story, and it's great. Like, especially like The Edge of the World into The Last Wish, you get this idea of like Geralt traveling with Dandelion, and the way they like their differing worldviews and coming up against these specific moments in time, and it's so good. I think that is my highlight of this book, is just the characters. They really do jump out from the page at you. But if I had to choose a favorite short story, I know The Last Wish is infamous, right? I have watched season 1 of a Netflix show, and I know it does adapt that to a certain extent at least. But I really did like The Edge of the World. That was really fun with the characters we met in that short story. I did really like The Last Wish as well. There's not really a story in this bunch that feels like it's worse than the others. They all feel pretty consistently compelling. At all points within this book, the story being told is clever, I would say. Like, at no point, I'm not saying it's unpredictable or anything like that, but at no point does it feel rote. At no point does it feel too cliche. Like, here's the thing, it does play on fairy tales a lot, and there are tropes, there's tropes in every fantasy book, and there are things in here which I think have even aged a little poorly. For instance, the male gaze is pretty omnipresent throughout this entire narrative, although you could just argue that that's truthful to Geralt's character, but still, it's a very masculine text, I would argue. And I don't know if that's going to change later on or not, but it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's definitely like what you would expect from 90s fantasy. And quite a lot of these stories do end up with Geralt boning down with someone, which is a thing in the games as well, so it didn't surprise me, but it is what it is. It just kind of almost felt to me like at any opportunity where there was a female character who it would feasibly be like, oh, this would be cool imagine if then they got it on kind of thing. It's like, at every opportunity, Sapkowski goes, yeah, then they fucked, why not? But it's never really gratuitous. Oh, I think I do have a favourite short story in this collection, actually. Sorry, I've just remembered. A Grain of Truth, the second short story in this collection. I've never really heard anyone talk about this story, but it's really, for me, where it really cemented the idea in my head of, like, both what this world was going to be and who this character was going to be. And the less I say about it, the better, because honestly, I want people to read this book and enjoy it the way I did. But I was absolutely captivated by that short story, and it had a really good action sequence towards the end as well. Sapkowski writes action sequences really well, even though I would say they're actually fairly few and far between in this book. This book is more concerned with, I feel like, exploring humanity. I feel like that's a major theme of The Witcher in general. Like, exploring humanity and the way people react to certain situations and the certain prejudices they have. and yeah, that stuff's all really compelling as well. But when he writes action, it's really good. Anyway, I think that's about all I have to say about this book for now. I've really enjoyed it. I'm resisting the urge to fire up the games again, but like, I looked it up. I've heard that like they're not. It's weird. I've heard that the relationship between the books and the games are weird, is the easiest way to put it. And I looked it up, and apparently, like, they're technically non-canonical sequels that sometimes contradict the events of the books. So there's that. What I really want to do, and this is like a super long form project, and who knows if I'll see it through, but I want to read all the Witcher books, and then I want to start with The Witcher 1 and play through that game, and then Witcher 2 and Witcher 3, so I can really get a sense of like the differences between the books and the games and what's going on there. Hell, if I ever actually do that, by the time I'm finished, The Witcher 4 will probably be out, so I can then go and play that. But yeah, the end of The Last Wish is interesting because the book directly recommends moving on to the main saga, starting with Book 3, Blood of Elves. But there is a book 2, and it's another short story collection, and it's called Sword of Destiny, so that's what I'm going to read next. What's really interesting is this book, book 2, was published a year before this book, book 1. I said this book twice, I'm sorry. So in terms of, writing style and, like, exploring this world and this character and stuff, it's going to be older material. And I wonder if that's going to show in the text. But people do recommend reading it in this order because apparently the short stories of book 2 end up working up to the events of the main series with Ciri and everything. So I guess that's what I'm going to do. I hope I enjoy it as much as I enjoyed this book. I'm also very aware of the fact that I still haven't read the last 2 Sun Eater novels, and I don't want to leave it so long that those books fall out of my brain, and I don't enjoy the last 2 books as much as I should, because, man, I was loving that series. And then the novella, Dregs of Empire, that really slowed me down. I've just not been enjoying that novella, not because of the writing or anything like that, but just the subject. I've never really liked stories set in those kinds of environments or in that kind of situation, so I need to get through that and then finish those 2 books as well. I don't know what order I'm going to do all this in. I don't want to slow my roll with The Witcher just because I feel some obligation to another series, but at the same time I don't want to forget the first 5 books of A Sun Eater before I go on and read books 6 and 7, somewhere a teenager just cheered. My loose idea is I will read this next Witcher collection of short stories, and then I will finish Sun Eater, and then I'll get back to The Witcher, but we all know how plans work out. But anyway, thank you for joining me on this endeavour while I talk about this book. Let me know down below what your favourite Witcher book is, I suppose, obviously without spoilers. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and I will catch you in whatever I make next.